Hello gentlemen, it's me, Mr. Brown, and welcome to another video lecture. Today we'll be talking about characterization, and we'll be looking at a few examples that we've encountered in texts this year. So buckle up and let's blast off. We all know that characters are the players who take part in the story's action. But how do these characters come to be? Particularly in a fictional story, the author has to create them. So characterization is the way the author creates and develops the characters. There are four basic methods by which an author uses characterization. The first one is making direct comments about the character through the voice of the narrator. For example, in Train Time, we hear Major Miles referred to as earnest. Earnest means showing sincere and intense conviction. So the author is telling us about his character, that he is someone who cares about what he does. The second form of characterization is describing a character's physical appearance. We can see this in Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, when Philip Lombard is described as a panther. Quote, "As the gong sounded, Philip Lombard came out of his room and walked to the head of the stairs. He moved like a panther, smoothly and noiselessly. There was something of the panther about him altogether. A beast of prey, pleasant to the eye. He was smiling to himself. A week, eh? He was going to enjoy this week." The third method is presenting the character's speech or actions. In this method, the author is allowing the character to speak for him or herself. Another example from Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. Lombard spoke. His eyes were amused. He said, "About those natives. Story's quite true. I left him. Matter of self-preservation. We were lost in the bush. I and a couple of other fellows took what food there was and cleared out. Not quite the act of Puka Sahib, I'm afraid, but self-preservation's a man's first duty. And natives don't mind dying, you know. They don't feel about it as Europeans do." Here we see the character's own words painting him as egotistical and cold. And the fourth method is presenting information about a character through the thoughts, words, and actions of another character. An example of this can be seen in Johnny's letter to Ponyboy near the end of The Outsiders, in which he tells him, "There's still good in the world. Tell Dally. I don't think he knows." Here, Johnny is revealing something about Dallas's character, and it illuminates maybe why he did some of the things that he did. Before we move into our Analyze the Text section, we should first talk about Native American boarding schools, also known as Indian residential schools. From the late 19th century through the mid-20th century, thousands of young people were taken from their communities and moved to these schools where they were assimilated into what was then thought of as mainstream Eurocentric culture. Students at these schools were not allowed to wear the traditional clothing of their people, they were not allowed to speak in their native tongues, and they even had their names changed to, quote, civilize and Christianize them. This form of trying to assimilate native children is not exclusive to the United States. In fact, it was also practiced in Canada and even the Soviet Union. Looking back, it's easy to see these practices as inhumane, cruel, and downright racist. Yet in McNichol's Train Time, the story is told from the perspective of Major Miller, who is not portrayed as an evil character. His intentions are represented as noble. However, by the end of the story, we see that the act of taking these children from their families, tearing them from their communities, and sending them to far-off places might not actually be in their best interest. So let's open up in our books to page 334, analyzing the text. Number 1, predict. What is going to happen to the children waiting for the train? Well, Major Miller tells us that quite clearly, that they will be taken to a boarding school in Oregon where they will learn to fit into mainstream culture. Number 2, cite evidence. Reread lines 17 through 27. What does this section tell you about Major Miles? What methods of characterization was used to convey that information? From the Major's actions, we can tell that he is used to being obeyed. Major Miles boomed, "You, what's your name? Get back here. Want to get killed? All of you stand back." He strode about soldier-like and waved commands. From his thoughts, we can tell that he is somewhat blind to the feelings of others. He had to drag the children out of hiding to get them away from their relatives, yet he felt that he was doing the right thing for them and that they should be grateful. Number 3, infer. How does the Major's point of view differ from the other characters' points of view? The Major's point of view is that he is helping the children by offering them the opportunity to go to school and get an education. However, the children feel that they are being sent away against their will, and they do not want to go. Their parents are, quote, frightened and uneasy. Number 4, analyze. What section of the story is told as a flashback? What does the flashback reveal about the plot and characters? The flashback, which begins on line 53 and continues to line 156, takes the reader to a time 6 months before the opening scene, during which the Major meets Aeneas and decided that the boy and his grandparents needed help. The author uses the flashback to develop the conflict between the Major and the Indians. Number 5, analyze. What might the reader understand about the situation that the Major appears not to understand? The Major feels that he is doing the right thing for the children and that their lives will be improved. The reader recognizes that the children's lives will change, but not necessarily for the better. They are being taken from their homes, families, and culture. Number 6, connect. How does the setting, the time and the place of the action affect the reader's understanding of the characters? The setting is an Indian reservation in the late 1800s. During this time, government officials believed that the best way to help Native American families was to send the children away to school. This helps the reader understand why the Major believed he was doing the right thing and why the children and their families were afraid. And number 7, draw conclusions. Why might the author have decided to end the story as he did? In the end, the Major is not able to complete the speech he wanted to give about the importance of the moment. The author may have ended the story this way to show how pointless that message would have been. Wrap up the last text of our final collection. We will be having our test on Friday. It will be 100 points, open book. You will have 24 hours to complete the assessment. Please email me with any questions that you might have.